In our discussions with religious people, in our productive discussions with religious people, sometimes it helps to have some tools, some resources at our disposal to be able to, be effective, to not just throw data points at them and get ourselves frustrated by the fact that they're not really listening. Or maybe there's specific information that we want or need, but we're having difficulty recalling. And I have thought for a long time, wouldn't it be cool if there was an app or some sort of a phone-based thing that could be a resource for people? And lo and behold, one exists, and it is releasing this month. And so for that reason, I wanted to invite a couple of very special guests to join me, Sarah Paquette and Christine Vigeant. Join me via Skype right now to talk about an app called Atheos. Thanks so much for being here, both of you. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having us on.
Okay, talk to me about the origins of the app. Where did it come from? How was it developed?
The app is a brainchild of Dr. Peter Boghossian at Portland State University. He's the author of a manual for creating atheists, and it's based on the ideas and techniques in the book, and it's just a very practical tool to help someone implement the techniques in the book.
So this is like the Anthony Magnabosco street epistemology thing where you're not beating him over the head with a baseball bat saying, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How can you believe this? But you're actually taking a more direct, kind, empathetic approach to other people who believe differently than we do, right?
Exactly. Empathy, compassion, and having humility in our own certainty is a big part of the application. It kind of coaches positive behavior.
I want to reframe that, too, that it's not just that we believe differently. It's that they're making a truth claim,
exactly.
A superstitious truth claim, and we're saying you're going to have to demonstrate that claim before I will believe it. So I know some folks will come after me for my use of language in that way, and they'd be right. So I want to clarify. We are saying if you're going to make a God claim, a faith claim, you're going to have to demonstrate that claim. How does the app work?
The idea for the app is to help train you in critical thinking. So you can use it on your own. You can go in there and you can go through the quizzes and train yourself to examine your own beliefs and to question them and to justify them and to figure out how you arrived at those beliefs. I think we can't go out and talk to other people about their beliefs and how they arrived at them without having examined our own, right? Or without having some sort of idea as to how to best engage someone and it being productive and not
argumentative and everybody's shouting and it's,
right.
Exactly. It's contentious right off the bat. I mean,
Yes.
I can understand how that might feel good. When I first came out of the faith, I was probably a lot more hot-headed. I used more acerbic language. I was less patient, certainly. I came to the realization, and honestly, I told Boghossian this, that it was after I read a manual for Creating Atheists that I began to become self-aware and realized that I had never browbeaten somebody else into changing their belief. What I saw was they were doubling down. They were saying, oh, yeah, well, I'm doubly right and you're doubly wrong. I mean, nothing was accomplished except that I walked away frustrated and exasperated and pissed off, and I was less inclined to engage the next time because I thought, why waste your time? And this is probably a common thing that you two have seen quite a bit.
Exactly. There's a lot of research that shows that you won't change someone's mind just by calling them stupid or yelling at them or giving them facts. That'll just cause a backfire effect. They'll dig their heels down, be more certain about their beliefs, probably end up using feel it in my heart types of justifications, and then everybody just kind of walks away unhappy.
Now, you're not saying that we never go in with the data to counter bad ideas, bad information with good information. Nobody's saying that. There's a time and a place for it, right?
But that's not the place to start.
Exactly. You put well-placed data after you've laid groundwork for a productive conversation.
Basically,
okay.
Yes.
Well, I've strung the viewers along long enough, so show me the application. Show me the phone app. I have a copy of it here. Now, this thing released this month in the United States, but you guys have been beta testing for a while. For how long and where?
I think almost 2 years.
Long time.
We had a pretty substantial beta test group. Lots of United States users, some international. Then we started a soft release a few months ago in the UK, or not the UK. We started in New Zealand and Australia, then UK and Hong Kong, and then the international release.
So if I open the app at the very top, as I get into Atheos, I'm presented with a cave map. You want to explain the concept of the cave?
So it pulls from the allegory of the cave, which is a story that Socrates tells about coming to knowledge, about coming to know reality. And so it uses that allegory for gently helping a interlocutor come from a place of, I guess, doxastic closure and coming to a place of the light outside of the cave where they can rethink their conclusions and perhaps be less dogmatic.
Now, Boghossian speaks about doxastic closure in his book. He talks about the fact that these people are roped off. The walls are high and they are not going out. They have essentially cordoned themselves off from receiving any new information.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We're trying to create a place of doxastic and cognitive openness.
So we're starting in the cave and sort of climbing our way out? Is that the idea?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So if I enter the cave, and I've got the phone here, if I enter the cave, I'm presented with some options. Cave level 1, the journey begins. And what happens next is I see an introduction followed by the time to skedaddle.
Yes.
Want to explain?
Yeah. That is when you should abort your mission, when you should stop the conversation. It's not when you're losing the argument. That's not the time to run. The time to run would be if somebody was, being violent or threatening violence or very hostile, and you can tell this is not going to go anywhere.
There are moments in these conversations when no forward progress is going to be made, and you have to be aware enough to know when to call it and split, right?
Exactly. Like, accept Jesus or I'll kick your ass is generally probably a time to leave.
I wonder what that would look like on a church marquee. Come to think of it. Expect curveballs, say what, it's good for me, it's my life, damn it. Many of these reasonings, quote-unquote reasonings, are arguments used for people who are defending an emotion-based belief.
Yes.
The introduction is just a way for me as someone who is going into the debate or discussions to, be prepared to see some pitfalls, to just get ramped up for the deeper discussions, yes?
Exactly.
It's just to give you an idea of how the app works, how the quizzes work.
It also puts you in a good headspace. So the answers that you have to choose to get the right answer are ones of openness and wanting to have a conversation, not the one that's like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to kick ass.
People who are debaters quite often they're pit bulls, and they're just go in
forceful.
Guns blazing.
Yes. In some circumstances, that's great. But when you're one-on-one with a believer or in a small group of people, that's off-putting, and it doesn't actually accomplish anything. In fact, you might end up in a worse position than you were to begin with because you might have driven those people further into their belief by being hostile, by being confrontational, by being aggressive about it.
So I'm in the Atheos app, and I finished the introductory stuff, and I go to cave level 2. Can you walk me through just one or two of these so we can give some specifics to our viewers?
Well, if you go to fallacies, for example, that's one aspect of the app. It gives you different fallacies, and you learn what they are, because if you don't know what they are, they're much harder to spot.
And if they're harder to spot, you don't know how to actually approach the conversation in a rational way that helps the person you're talking to.
So define the fallacy: cherry picking, citing information that supports a claim while ignoring information that refutes it, or using multiple meanings of a word or misusing language to reach an invalid conclusion. These are selections that I must make?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So you would choose the answer that you think is correct. And then it tells you what the correct answer is. And
so
it also
obviously I'm choosing number 1. I'm cherry picking, citing information that supports my claim, and I'm skipping over the stuff that speaks out against it.
Exactly.
And then I'm given the option to move ahead to false cause, asserting a casual relationship where one does not exist, or presenting only 2 diametrical options when one or more unmentioned alternatives exist. This is just a list, then, of some common fallacies that we'll be presented with in a debate arena.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, this is a list of fallacies. And then there are also, if you go further down the app, as you go down or as you go out of the app and you go out of the cave and you get closer to light and reason, the app gets harder. It's increasing in difficulty, and eventually you will get to some dialogues.
Yeah, levels 1 and 2 are designed just as an introduction to this type of argumentative style. And I guess argumentative style is kind of a misnomer because we're trying to be a bit more gracious in our conversations, but it just kind of softballs the material in for those who aren't used to perhaps the idea of what the argumentative fallacy is.
What I like, too, about the app is that when I make a selection, and it is the correct selection, the incorrect selection is also defined. It says, well, actually, yes, this is a certain type of argument, but the one you didn't select, the wrong answer, is wrong because it's this type of thing. I think that's well played.
That's really the goal. The goal is to teach people why a certain response is more likely to lead to a productive discussion and is more likely to help the person question their belief than another answer. Mm-hmm. And it's also good to know why an answer is not good, why an answer does not accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, which is to create these spaces of openness and which is to get people to maybe re-examine their beliefs.
Define the fallacy equivocation. Using multiple meanings of a word or misusing language to reach an invalid conclusion. So I select that. And it says excellent. And then it tells me that the wrong answer or the answer that was not associated there with equivocation, the implying that the qualities of a part or the qualities of the whole is the fallacy of composition. It's giving me information even about the incorrect answer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it does that further on for the dialogues too. It lets you know why a particular reaction to something like my fertility spell isn't working is either an appropriate reaction or an inappropriate reaction, and how to facilitate a positive and non-dogmatic conversation that helps the believer question their conclusion.
Think someone's ever encountered that one in discussion? My fertility spell is not, I'm sure it's happened. All sorts of off-the-wall stuff.
It might be an acupuncture treatment for fertility issues.
Cave level 3, the light fades. Someone explain level 3 to me. I'm not going to do all the levels. I just want to go deep enough so our viewers can really get a three-dimensional look at the Atheos app.
So it starts ramping up a little bit. This is where it's going to start getting a little harder. There's a section called Looking at the Trees. Mm-hmm. The first one is, the world is designed. 2, design implies a designer. 3, therefore, the world is designed by God. So you get one of your first introductions to a really common, not so great argument.
And the responses are not generally, the correct responses are not generally the ones that just throw evidence and facts at people. The first thing that we want people to do is to help people, first of all, to understand what the person is saying, mm-hmm. right? To understand where they're coming from.
Uh-oh, this means we have to start listening.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We don't always do that very well, do we?
And I think that's the problem. People go in and they have these conversations with believers and they think, well, if I just give them the right information, they will change their minds. But that's not how it works. You first have to figure out, okay, you have to model the behavior that you want to see. You need to go and you need to ask, okay, well, how did you arrive at this conclusion? How do you know this? What led you to this belief?
And then you actually have to define the terms you're even talking about.
Right.
I'm guilty. Someone will start to say something and it's an argument I've heard before, and instead of listening to them, or I think it's an argument I've heard before, it's going to be, I'll already start formulating a response. I'm no longer listening. I'm guilty.
Yes.
Done it all the time,
Yeah. Exactly. And that's how you miss the nuance of what the person is saying a lot of times. And then, your response might not be appropriate for what was actually being said. And I think the other thing that this app does, in a lot of the responses, there would be counterexamples, for example. So if you go and you have a conversation with someone and they say the world was designed and therefore, there is a God, it doesn't necessarily just say, well, how do you know this? It can also, sometimes the app gives you counterexamples that you can use to challenge certain claims.
So if I look at potential responses as given to me within the Atheos app, how can you be sure your God is the only possibility? Why couldn't advanced aliens from another dimension create this instantiation of the universe. The world isn't designed. It's an inexplicable series of random events. I'm guessing many of our responses are actually going to come in the form of a question. Is that right?
Yes. So, for example, in this particular case, the answer, how can you be sure your God is the only possibility? Why couldn't advanced aliens have created the universe? That would be a good answer because it's a counterexample. You're asking a question, like, how is this the belief that you hold more likely than, say, this other alternative? And then if you look at the answer, the world isn't designed. It's an inexplicable series of random events. That's listed as an incorrect answer, not because the claim itself is incorrect, but because the answer does not get the interlocutor to question their belief.
If I move forward then, look how well this banana fits in my hand. Oh, that's nice. A little great comfort. And how easy it is to peel. That proves God designed it for me to eat. My responses or potential responses. Sorry, I'm not sure I follow. Could you help me understand where your God comes into play? Does the fact that a human skull makes a good breakfast cereal bowl indicate that God meant them to be used as such? Isn't that just cherry picking? A helpful example. What about delicious-looking yet poisonous berries? Does that make coconuts and pineapples the creations of Satan? So I'm looking for a response that keeps the burden of proof upon them, that keeps them thinking, that keeps them off the defensive.
Right.
But also clarifies what they're talking about, too.
So in this case, there are two correct answers. One would be, sorry, I'm not sure I follow. Could you help me understand where your God comes into play here? Because it, again, puts the emphasis or the question back to the interlocutor. Well, yes, I understand what you're saying, but how did you arrive at this conclusion?
Exactly.
Would I also be able to use the delicious-looking yet poisonous berries example as a response? Those exist in nature, those types of things?
Yes. So that is an appropriate response because, as it says here, it points out the weakness of the argument without being disrespectful. Whereas the human skull analogy...
It's just being flippant, like needlessly flippant.
But it would be so much fun to... I'll admit, it would be fun to say, right?
Sure.
It's perfectly round. It would contain 2 cups of Wheaties. It's satisfying to us in the short term, and it's completely unproductive in the long term if we're trying to get results. I totally get it.
Right. You might want to use that. You could use that with a friend of yours that you're already close to.
Exactly.
Well, also this comes back to the macro versus the micro, right? We've mentioned, and you've brought up several times, that the one-on-one conversations, the rules are a little different than if we're addressing big ideas on the larger stage. Mockery does have its place. Harder, edgier fare does have its place. I'm not sure I subscribe to all methods are equally productive.
No, because
we need the diplomat, we need the firebrand. I hear this quite a bit. And I think in a nuanced way, you can find many instances where these tactics can be effective. But I just don't think all tactics are effective just because they exist.
No. Right.
Sometimes you're just an asshole. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Don't be an asshole.
If you're a hammer looking for a nail, you're going to find lots of nails.
Don't be an asshole. So I answer that question correctly, and then I move a little deeper. Mindless nothingness simply can't cause complexity. I've heard the complexity argument in many instances. What about mini tornadoes? Did God have a finger on the button creating those? Why not just accept complexity as a puzzle to be solved? Do you think the nothingness was more complex than we realized prior to its transformation? The complexity of nothing is perhaps the greatest source of something that nothing has yet explained, and perhaps there's never been a state of nothingness and the universe always existed, isn't proceeding honestly accepting that we don't have enough information. So if I select what about mini tornadoes, asserting complexity can't emerge from the physical properties of a system ignores the fact that it does so on a routine basis. Further, if we do come across a topic that science can't explain, that doesn't justify inserting a supernatural explanation. How deep is the app itself? How many pages, how many chapters, how many levels to the cave are we talking about?
There are 10 cave levels. So 10 is the hardest.
Within each, multiple quizzes. There are...
I see 5 is onward. 6, banish ignorance. Cave level 7, the examined life. Cave level 8, Shadows, Cave Level 9, The Unshackling. Oh, we got to go in here for just a second. These dialogues are difficult. Your conversation partner will be more adept and offer more complex responses. This is when the apologist, even the armchair apologist, become really slick and fast and make things that on their surface sound really convincing. Yes?
People have these ideas that believers, are not smart, or that atheists, because they don't believe in a God, are so much smarter. But that's not the case. A lot of smart people believe in God, and a lot of smart people are atheists, and a lot of stupid people believe in God, and a lot of stupid people are atheists.
Thank you for saying that. I know a lot of amazingly smart people who are God believers. In fact, it was... there have been many people, Shermer and others, who talk about the fact that the intelligent people are actually really clever and are best at outsmarting themselves. They can rationalize the irrational because they're so good at jamming the puzzle pieces together in creative ways.
For sure.
Dialogue, evolution, V, creation. Let's just look at a couple of these. Select the best reply to, for one thing, the idea of macroevolution seems absurd to me. One species cannot give birth to another. And I am presented with a list of potential responses. I'll just read them quickly. The idea of macroevolution doesn't even make sense. It's a term invented by creationist apologists. This is going to put them back on their heels. This is not where I want to go, so I'll move on.
Yes.
Speciation typically occurs when populations are reproductively isolated, and it takes place over many, many generations. Again, that's a declarative statement. Do I want to lead with declaratives at this point, or am I still asking questions? Speciation is a process that occurs gradually over generations, not instantaneously, or the nature of reality isn't affected by what you personally find absurd. The notion that Earth is spherical was once considered absurd. Am I leading at this measure with some of the information? Are we deep enough into the rabbit hole that I'm using some data?
I would say so.
You have to be careful with it, though. Like the other answer that said the nature of reality isn't affected by what you personally find is absurd, and then brings up the flat Earth theory. It's just a little too
abrupt, I guess.
Abrupt and just a little too abrasive. Whereas the definitions of speciation, they're just treated a little more gently. You're giving the information so that they can assess it, rather than also calling them stupid and giving them information.
So it's just fine to create a point of clarification and say, look, let's clarify this, let's better understand it, and let's properly define it.
Exactly. Yeah. Clarification is...
Yes. You always want to avoid answers that will shut down the conversation.
Well, some of that's out of my control. I mean,
yes.
If they shut it down...
Sure.
And
there's always, and sometimes people are just done talking about it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If somebody needs to stop the conversation and walks away from it, that is actually a moment where they might have some time to think about what they just heard,
Boghossian used to say that if you see somebody get flustered or frustrated, it means that you're winning. I'm paraphrasing Peter. I hope I'm not saying it wrong, but at least it means you're being effective. Like there's a moment of cognitive dissonance going on.
Yes.
And the fact that you presented a basic question in an amicable way and they're starting to, tilt, it means that you actually are rattling the cage enough where they're having difficulty reconciling what they once assumed.
Exactly.
If that's true, we would see transitional species, but we don't. We see, quote, kinds of organisms. Oh, yeah, a little Kinham
argument
theology going on. And we have the God of the Gaps fallacy. It's been debunked. As it happens, the fossil record is full of species that could be called transitional organisms. Actually, in that sense, all species are transitional. Evolution is still happening. A lot of sacred texts make mistakes with these kinds, like labeling whales as fish or bats as birds. What I like, too, about the app is that it's not an either-or. Many times there are multiple answers that can be effective. Many of that's going to be intuitive on the behalf of the debater, depending on who you're speaking to, what their personality type is, what type of approach, what type of information they respond to. Some of this is going to be just us calling audibles on the field during the game, right?
Yes.
If our listeners and viewers wanted to find the app, is it on Google Play and the iTunes Store and all those places?
Yes.
Where do they go?
It is on iTunes and it is on Google Play. And we also have our website, www.atheos-app.com. And we're on Twitter under @Atheos. And we're on Facebook.
Well, I'll make sure and put all those links for the pages and the downloads and whatnot in the description box of the video that's posting to YouTube, so that if people want to just scroll down there and click the link directly, they can, or they can just search it on any of these app stores. Yes. And we'll get the word out. I mean, any tool that allows us to be more effective. I don't know about most people. I think I want to change minds. And if I'm wrong, I want my mind to be changed. I mean, you two know what I'm talking about, right? It's one thing to sit in a bubble and say, we're right, they're wrong, we're smart, they're stupid, we're enlightened, they're insane, which is the kind of language I often hear. That kind of smug, superior, the world isn't really going to change, but at least I'm right mentality. Or we can say, I do want to change minds. Yeah. I wish someone had challenged me earlier in my own life. I might have been able to break out of superstition so much faster. I may have had so many more years where I wasn't constrained by dogma and fear and shame and bad ideas. So if we're about changing minds, we need to be about the tools that help us be effective in challenging other people's beliefs and even our own.
Absolutely. And I think most importantly for any atheist, freethinker, agnostic, skeptic, we need to go and examine our own beliefs first. We need to approach any conversation with people with the thought that they might know something that we don't know. So when we go and we have these conversations with believers, we don't go in there thinking, all right, ready to change some minds. We need to go in there with a little bit of humility and think, okay, I have this set of beliefs, but let's find out what this person has to say. Because it could be that they have a really great argument and we just have not heard it before, and we might have to change our mind based on new evidence that we're given. So, we can't go in there and feel like we have all the answers. We need to be just as dogmatically open as we expect other people to be.
Sarah, any final thoughts from you before we call it?
This is just a perfect showcase of Pete's work. It's about doxastic openness. It's about humility. It's about approaching people in a positive way that helps to make a change.
One thing that I would like to add, though, is that in the app itself, we don't just have these quizzes. There's also sections with resources. Mm-hmm. There's links to organizations. There are little essays written by prominent skeptics and atheists. So there's plenty of stuff.
There's a comment section. There's ways for users to get involved. Once we have users that are submitting their own ideas for content, we're going to have a user-generated section. So there's a way for users to be involved with us. Like we're accepting feedback, we respond, we have moderators in there actually engaging with users in the comments section. It has a bit of a social aspect too. You can tweet it, you can Facebook it, you can share it with your friends from the platform itself.
I like it. It's always sharpening itself. It's got its eyes and ears open. It's sort of a community effort. I like that idea very much. It's called Atheos. I will put the links in the description box of this video, and I encourage all of our listeners and viewers to take the time and check it out. And if it works for you, to use it in your own discussions with believers and use it to examine what you hold, what you believe, what you think, why you think it. Sarah Paquette and Christine Vigeant, thank you both for taking the time to introduce us to this, and we'll get the word out for you, okay?
All right. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
We do. Thank you.